On May 29, 1453, the walls of Constantinople finally fell. After 53 days of relentless bombardment, the Byzantine capital that had stood for over 1,000 years collapsed under Ottoman siege. But what followed in those chaotic hours wasn't just the end of an empire. It was the beginning of countless personal tragedies that history has struggled to fully document. Among the tens of thousands captured that day were women who had devoted their lives to God, nuns from convents across the city who found themselves facing a fate they could never have imagined. Their story is one of faith tested to its breaking point, of survival in the face of erasure, and of a system that turned human beings into commodities. This is the story of what happened when the Ottoman Empire captured Christian nuns. To understand what these women faced, we need to grasp the broader context of Christian life under Ottoman rule. The Ottoman Empire, which had been expanding since its founding in the late 13th century, had developed a complex relationship with its non-Muslim subjects. Under Islamic law, Christians and Jews were classified as dhimmis, protected but subordinate communities who could practice their faith in exchange for paying the jizya, a special tax levied exclusively on non-Muslims. This arrangement, known as the millet system, allowed religious communities a degree of autonomy while maintaining their inferior legal status. Christians could not testify against Muslims in court, were barred from certain professions, and faced restrictions on building or repairing churches. The Ottoman state didn't require mass conversion, but it created powerful incentives for Christians to embrace Islam, from tax relief to access to government positions. Yet the conquest of new territories often brought a different, more brutal reality, as the initial hours and days following a military victory could see widespread violence against civilian populations. When Constantinople fell on that spring morning in 1453, Sultan Mehmed II allowed his troops 3 days of looting, a common practice in medieval warfare that turned the city into a nightmare of violence. Contemporary accounts paint a horrific picture. Leonard of Chios, the Archbishop of Mytilene, who was present during the siege, documented the atrocities in a letter to Pope Nicholas V. He described how Ottoman soldiers pillaged the city, murdered or enslaved tens of thousands, and violated women and children without mercy. His account specifically mentions that crosses on church roofs were torn down and trampled, that women were violated, and that nuns were subjected to what he termed foul debaucheries. The testimony of Nicolò Barbaro, a Venetian crossbowman present during the siege, provides similar accounts. He described in his diary how Ottoman soldiers sought out monasteries, leading nuns to the Fleet where they were abused before being sold at auction throughout Ottoman territory. Some women, facing dishonor, chose to cast themselves into wells and drown rather than fall into Ottoman hands. These weren't isolated incidents, but part of a systematic pattern. Leonard of Chios reported that approximately 60,000 Christians were captured during the fall of Constantinople alone. The elderly and infirm who had sought sanctuary in churches were killed, while the remainder were chained and prepared for sale into slavery. The capture of nuns during Ottoman conquests wasn't limited to Constantinople. Throughout the 15th and 16th centuries, as Ottoman forces expanded through the Balkans and Mediterranean, similar scenes repeated. During the conquest of Cyprus in 1570, when the city of Nicosia fell after a prolonged siege, thousands of inhabitants were killed or captured. Women and boys were among those taken as slaves and sold throughout Ottoman territories. When the island of Gozo near Malta was raided in 1551, between 5,000 and 7,000 people, the majority of the island's population were taken as slaves. These raids and conquests created a steady stream of Christian captives flowing into Ottoman slave markets, and religious women who lived in enclosed convents were particularly vulnerable. Their seclusion meant they had no military protection and often no warning before Ottoman forces arrived. Once captured, these women entered a brutal system of human trafficking that had been refined over centuries. Constantinople itself became a major hub for the slave trade. Historical records and customs statistics suggest that in the 16th and 17th centuries, about 1/5 of Constantinople's population consisted of slaves. The slave markets operated under Ottoman state supervision, with designated officials overseeing transactions and collecting taxes. According to the memoir of Evliya Çelebi, a 17th century Ottoman traveler, the Slave Traders Guild had shops containing slave rooms. Regular markets hosted auctions where slaves were bought and sold. As Italian ambassador Ottaviano Bon observed in the early 17th century, slaves in Constantinople were examined and sold with buyers inspecting their bodies and ascertaining their country of origin before purchase. The prices varied based on age, physical condition, and specialized skills. For nuns, who typically had some education and could read and write, this might have increased their value for certain types of domestic service, particularly in wealthy households. The journey to these markets was itself an ordeal. Captives were often marched hundreds of miles, bound and watched by armed guards. According to historical records, the conditions were merciless, with inadequate food and water. Those who fell ill or couldn't keep pace were left behind or killed. Once they reached Constantinople, the captives were sorted, examined, and catalogued. Ottoman officials kept meticulous records, noting names, ages, physical characteristics, and intended uses. Many of these documents still exist in Turkish archives, providing concrete evidence of the scale of the slave trade. For religious women, this transition was particularly traumatic. Having lived in enclosed communities devoted to prayer and spiritual discipline, they were suddenly thrust into a world that treated them as property. The psychological impact of being stripped of their habits, publicly examined, and sold to the highest bidder cannot be overstated. Those who were purchased faced various fates depending on their buyers and physical characteristics. The most attractive women might be offered to the Sultan or high Ottoman officials, with some destined for the imperial harem. The Ottoman harem was not simply a collection of concubines, but a complex political institution where enslaved women could rise to positions of considerable influence if they bore sons who might become heirs. Women entering the Sultan's household were converted to Islam upon arrival. For nuns who had taken vows of celibacy and devoted themselves to Christ, this represented a total violation of everything they held sacred. Other captives became domestic servants in the households of Ottoman elites. Istanbul's wealthiest families kept large numbers of slaves. Sources indicate that one courtier of Suleiman I, Iskender Çelebi, possessed between 6,000 and 7,000 slaves. In these households, female slaves performed various tasks from cooking and cleaning to childcare and textile work. While some masters treated their slaves relatively well, others were brutal. The pressure to convert, however, was constant and multifaceted. The Ottoman system created powerful incentives for apostasy without always resorting to direct force. The most obvious pressure was economic. As dhimmis, Christians faced the jizya tax, which could be substantial. Conversion to Islam immediately relieved this burden and opened doors to employment in government and military service that were closed to non-Muslims. For enslaved Christians, the calculation was different, but no less compelling. Islamic law permitted the enslavement of non-Muslims, but forbade enslaving fellow Muslims. In theory, conversion should have led to manumission, though in practice, masters often found ways to retain converted slaves. Beyond economics, there was social pressure. Living in an overwhelmingly Muslim environment, speaking Turkish, serving Muslim masters, and being cut off from Christian community and worship created conditions where maintaining one's original faith became increasingly difficult. For nuns who had relied on communal prayer, liturgy, and the support of their sisters, this isolation was especially devastating. Some accounts describe how converted Christian women in Ottoman households were given new Muslim names and forbidden from practicing their former religion. Those who secretly maintained Christian practices risked severe punishment. The The most systematic form of forced conversion was the Devshirme system, which, while primarily targeting Christian boys, reveals much about Ottoman attitudes toward conversion. From the late 14th through the 17th century, Ottoman officials periodically conducted levees in Balkan Christian communities, taking one boy from every 40 households. These children, typically aged 7 to 20, were forcibly converted to Islam, given Turkish names, and trained to serve in either the Janissary Corps or Ottoman administration. The practice was deeply resented by Christian families who attempted various strategies to avoid it, from marrying their sons young to mutual agreement between Muslim and Christian families to have both convert to Islam to escape the levy. While the Devshirme technically offered paths to power, the trauma of forced separation, conversion, and cultural erasure was profound. Christian folk songs from the period cursed the Sultan for the kidnapping of children. This system demonstrates that Ottoman conversion practices, while not universally applied, could be systematic and coercive when it served state interests. Yet not all succumbed to these pressures. Throughout Ottoman history, there are documented cases of Christians who resisted conversion despite torture and death. During the siege of Otranto in 1480, when Ottoman forces captured the southern Italian city, approximately 800 inhabitants were given a choice: convert to Islam or be executed. According to traditional accounts, they chose death and were beheaded. While modern historians debate some details of this event, with some questioning whether the executions were primarily religious or punitive in nature, the episode was recognized by the Catholic Church, and Pope Benedict XVI formally acknowledged that these individuals were killed out of hatred for their faith. These martyrs, though not nuns, exemplified the same choice many religious women faced. Some nuns likely maintained their faith in secret, practicing hidden Christianity while outwardly conforming to Ottoman demands. Others may have formed small underground communities, meeting for prayer in whatever spaces they could find. The resilience of Orthodox Christianity in Ottoman territories suggests that many found ways to preserve their faith despite enormous pressure. Monasteries that survived Ottoman conquest often became centers of cultural and religious preservation. Under Ottoman rule, some monasteries retained their properties through special privileges, gradually becoming important economic and intellectual centers. These institutions played a crucial role in maintaining Christian identity and eventually contributed to the revival of national identities in the 19th century. The long-term fates of captured nuns varied widely. Some disappeared entirely into the Ottoman system, their names and identities lost to history. A few may have been ransomed back to Christian communities. European powers, particularly Catholic religious orders like the Trinitarians, conducted redemption campaigns throughout Ottoman territories. Historical documents list Christians, including some women, who were ransomed from Constantinople and other Ottoman cities in later centuries. However, these redemptions required substantial sums of money and diplomatic connections that most captives lacked. For those who remained enslaved, life expectancy depended on their circumstances. Domestic slaves in wealthy households might live relatively comfortable lives, while those in harsher conditions faced disease, overwork, and early death. Some enslaved women eventually married Ottoman men, either by choice or coercion, further integrating into Ottoman society. The children of such unions would typically be raised as Muslims, effectively ending the Christian lineage. Yet it seems plausible that other captives maintained their faith for years, possibly passing it on to their children in secret, though direct evidence for such hidden Christian communities among former nuns is difficult to find in the historical record. The experiences of these captured nuns left lasting marks on Orthodox Christian consciousness. The Fall of Constantinople became a defining tragedy in Orthodox memory, commemorated annually in Greek churches. The violation of nuns and the desecration of monasteries were central to narratives of Ottoman oppression that shaped Christian identity in the Balkans for centuries. These stories fueled resistance movements and eventually contributed to the Greek War of Independence in the 19th century. They also created a legacy of religious trauma that informed Christian-Muslim relations in the region. Even today, the memory of Ottoman conquest and the suffering of Christian populations remains a sensitive topic. Historians continue to debate the extent and nature of Ottoman persecution, with some emphasizing the relative tolerance of the millet system, while others point to systematic discrimination and periodic violence. What's clear is that for the women who experienced capture, enslavement, and pressure to convert, the Ottoman system was anything but tolerant. Their individual stories were often lost, buried in archives, or never recorded at all, but collectively they reveal a darker side of empire building that deserves to be remembered. The story of nuns captured by the Ottoman Empire is ultimately a story about the human cost of conquest. Behind the grand narratives of sultans and battles, of empires rising and falling, were countless individual tragedies. Women who had devoted their lives to prayer and service found themselves treated as commodities, their faith tested in ways they never anticipated. Some maintained their beliefs against all odds, finding strength in scripture memorized in childhood or in secret gatherings with fellow captives. Others, broken by circumstance, converted and tried to make new lives in a foreign culture. Neither choice was easy, and both deserve recognition. These women were not just passive victims, but human beings who made choices under impossible conditions, who found ways to survive and sometimes even to resist. Their experiences remind us that religious freedom, which many take for granted today, was hard-won and frequently violated throughout history. The Ottoman Empire's treatment of Christian captives, while perhaps not unusual for its time, reveals the tensions inherent in any system that divides people by faith and treats religious difference as grounds for subordination. As we reflect on these stories, we're confronted with uncomfortable questions about faith, identity, and power. What does it mean to maintain belief when everything around you demands apostasy? How do we judge those who converted under pressure? What responsibilities do historians have to recover these lost voices? The nuns captured by the Ottoman Empire left few records in their own words, filtered instead through the accounts of male chroniclers who had their own agendas. Yet their experiences shaped history in profound ways, contributing to religious antagonisms that persist to the present day, while also demonstrating remarkable resilience and faith. By telling their stories, we honor not just these particular women, but all those who have suffered for their beliefs throughout history. If this story moved you, if you want to hear more untold narratives from history's shadows, hit that like button and subscribe to the Codex of History. Leave a comment below sharing your thoughts on this difficult chapter of the past. How should we remember the victims of religious persecution? What lessons do their experiences hold for our own time? Your engagement helps us continue bringing these forgotten stories to light. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and never forget that behind every historical event are real people with real lives, hopes, and sorrows that deserve to be remembered.